All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for Weather Where You Are. I am First Alert Meteorologist Courteney Jacobazzi. We have to talk about the potential for severe weather on this upcoming Sunday, unfortunately, for your weekend. And we do have a First Alert Weather Day because of that risk for storms, including that potential for maybe an isolated severe storm as well. I'm going to take you through the timing, what we're looking at threat-wise, and some of the kind of question marks that are still in the forecast in terms of this severe threat. We had a really tricky forecast yesterday or what was it, Wednesday night into Thursday, or Thursday? Yes, Wednesday night into Thursday. What day is it? It's Friday. Wednesday night into Thursday, we had that wedge build in, and that was the big question mark. Does that wedge break, and does our atmosphere become more unstable to allow for severe storms? We're entering into a very similar pattern this weekend. We're going to have a wedge start to build in on Saturday, and if that continues to hold on strong in our forecast, that's going to limit our instability and ultimately limit our severe threat. I'll talk about that in more detail coming up here in the next couple of minutes, but we're going to go through everything that you need to know to get you ready for this First Alert Weather Day on Sunday. All right, everyone, so here's a look at the severe outlook. A level 1 of 5 threat, which essentially just means isolated severe storms are possible for most of Metro Atlanta and North Georgia. That's mainly for a damaging wind gust threat. I do think the tornado threat, which is very low, by the way, is mainly along and west of I-75, confined to far west Georgia. Anywhere that could be on the fringe of that wedge will have the highest likelihood of maybe a brief spin-up tornado that creates a little more shear. Again, that allows for more instability to enter the forecast. So I do think that where that wedge is least likely to hold on strong will be in far west Georgia and areas south of I-20. So I think that's where we're primarily going to focus on for that tornado threat. And that is highlighted by that level 2 of 5 threat for severe storms, which means isolated severe storms are more likely in that level 2 of 5 threat. But that is all conditional, right? So here's a look at our setup. Going into Saturday, we're going to have this wedge of cool air build in. That's an area of high pressure goes off to our northeast, and it helps pull in cooler air from our north, and it runs up against the Appalachian Mountains and spills into North Georgia. Cool air is stable air, so you don't get any lift underneath that. You don't have any fuel for thunderstorms. Any storms that you may hear, just like early on Thursday morning, those could be elevated thunderstorms where the instability or fuel isn't at the surface, and usually those stay below severe limits. That's kind of what we experienced on Thursday morning. But nonetheless, we have another wedge building in, and that's going to bring some cool and stable air just in time for the start of the weekend. But what the question is how far north does a warm front with our next weather system lift north and kind of erode that wedge? It's really a tricky forecast to determine, because the wedge essentially is cooler, more dense air, which is a sinking motion. So sometimes that warm air overrides it. Just really tricky. I could go into the science lesson all day long, but just know that if that warm front pushes that wedge out, that destabilizes our air, and that creates an increased risk for storms and maybe even some severe weather. So as we go through the weekend, we are going to watch mainly between the hours of 4 and 8 a.m. for that potential for severe storms. And I'm going to show you First Alert Futurecast in just a second. This is going into Wednesday, which is our next First Alert Weather Day beyond the weekend. But nonetheless, the main time frame for everything is going to be between about 4 and 8 a.m. What we'll be looking for is a cold front that will bring a pretty stout line of showers and storms to the forecast. And along the cold front, our most widespread threat is going to be damaging straight line winds, which is important because while, tornadoes obviously sound scarier and they are very violent if they do occur, damaging straight line winds, especially in a setup that we're in right now with how saturated the ground is, can definitely cause plenty of damage. So if we do get those damaging straight line winds to roll through with the saturated ground, that's more than likely going to take down trees for us. So that is a concern going into the upcoming weekend. And I'm going to take you through exactly what you need to know here with First Alert Futurecast right now. I pulled up the wrong one for you, but bear with me and we'll get you through the right one. So going through Saturday, we'll have rain roll through. Why is this important? Well, rain can actually help reinforce that wedge. Again, when you hear me say wedge, all you need to know about that is stable air, right? So you'll start rainy on Saturday morning very early. So if you're up and at it really early, if we have any 5Ks across the area, which I'm sure we do, a lot of those are very, very early in the morning, so that just might impact that. Otherwise, Saturday is just going to be for lack of better words, yucky. We're going to have that wedge in place, which means essentially it's going to be cloudy, it's going to be cool, it's going to be damp, it might be a little breezy, might feel a little drizzly at times, and we'll have the chance for just light scattered showers through the day. So not the nicest Saturday, definitely more of an inside kind of day on Saturday. But then here comes Sunday. So at this point, we're going to be watching our temperatures. Are they starting to warm? Is that warm front pushing out that wedge? And that's going to be the big key player here in our forecast. Going into about 5 o'clock in the morning, here comes that front moving into northwest Georgia. But what I want you to focus your attention on as well, see the little cells that are kind of firing up out ahead of that front. Those are sometimes what you really have to watch, because if there is any wind shear present, which there very well could be on the edge of wherever that wedge sets up, and that could cause those to spin. So those little cells out ahead of cold fronts sometimes can be the most troublesome because they take advantage of wind shear better than these larger cold fronts. So we'll be watching for that going into 5 o'clock Sunday morning, and then going into the 6, 7 o'clock hour. Rain and storms moving through downtown Atlanta. At this point, again, heavy rain, gusty wind likely, so trees could be coming down. This will be a very early morning event. Many of you probably still sleeping, so it's a really good idea with the timing of this and it being on a Sunday morning that you have a way to receive weather warnings. Our First Alert Weather app is a great tool for that. It's going to be a pretty quick moving system, at least the brunt of that cold front. By 8 o'clock, we're done with our severe threat, but trailing showers continue, so getting up and at it, maybe headed to church on Sunday morning, getting up to go run some errands, we do still have the chance for some lingering showers. And going into Sunday afternoon, we'll start to see clearing of skies. It'll be breezy and cold air will be ushering in, leading into a very cold Monday. So again, to kind of put that all together for you, starting at around 4 a.m., we're going to be watching for the potential for severe storms, maybe for even some isolated severe storms out ahead of that main line. Main line comes in between 4 and 8 a.m., bringing more than likely damaging straight line winds and heavy rain, but you can't rule out a brief tornado, especially along the Georgia and Alabama border there. Let's go through risk by risk here. The Storm Prediction Center kind of gives us outlooks for each specific risk, and we're not looking at any hail, but we are looking at the potential for damaging winds and that tornado threat. So by and large, our wind risk is going to be the greatest, especially as that line first moves through into West Georgia. If it does run into any kind of wedge setup, that will help weaken it. So that wind risk does go down for most of North Georgia and Metro Atlanta, but still not none. And just with how quickly the system's going to move, I think even that forward progression is going to cause some issues wind-wise. The tornado threat, again, really low. We're talking 2%. With even this last system, it was a 5%. So this is indicating that that wedge is more than likely going to hold steady for us. And I do think, again, we're going to mainly be looking in far West Georgia because that will be kind of just out of the reach of that wedge if it does start to weaken. So if you live from Floyd, Chattooga County through Carroll County down towards Troup and Meriwether County, you will want to be on slightly higher alert going into early Sunday morning just because of that potential for maybe that brief isolated tornado there. When it comes to rainfall, we're not necessarily looking at a widespread flash flooding threat. However, our ground is still saturated. It won't have time to rebound before we get more rain. So we still have active flood warnings for a lot of our rivers. Those will start to go down today and into tomorrow, but we're going to add more rain on top of that, potentially another 0.8 to over an inch of rain in some spots within just a couple of hours. So that could briefly bring those river levels back up in some spots. That's also going to help keep the ground saturated. So as I mentioned, one of our bigger concerns, I think, is going to be the wind with these saturated soils and heavy rain moving in. I think that will be an issue when it comes to down trees, which ultimately can lead to down power lines and power outages. So something we'll be watching really carefully for you. But again, just a really good morning on Sunday, something to think about. The reason for our First Alert Weather Day to kind of give you a heads up that some nasty weather is moving in. We're not looking at any kind of severe weather outbreak situation. Definitely don't have the setup for that. But nonetheless, it definitely could cause some issues when it comes to down trees, power lines, power outages, and maybe that isolated severe weather as well. So you'll definitely want to have that way to receive weather warnings so that you can stay in the know and also track these storms as they come in. Of course, we'll be on air for you if anything severe happens, but you can have that First Alert Weather app on your phone. It has the radar, and you can see when the storms are about to knock on your door just to keep track of what's happening in your neighborhood. Of course, we'll continue to update you if any of this changes. If we can see through the day on Saturday that this wedge is starting to erode and that it looks like our severe threat's going to be heightened, we will let you know, more than likely through our app. So again, great tool to have, but we're going to be monitoring this situation very carefully for you. We'll have a full team of meteorologists here on Sunday morning to get you through it if we do happen to have any tornado warnings or anything severe occur. So just stay posted, stay tuned to the forecast. We'll get you through it. And next week, get ready for the cold. That will come after the storms this weekend. All right, everyone, be sure to join us at Atlanta News First at noon. We'll give you the full rundown of not only First Alert Weather Day Sunday, but all of the weather to come, including this beautiful day on Valentine's Day. Enjoy it while it lasts. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. We'll catch you here next time.